Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Surai Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swami Tapaharini. Welcome to the Friday scripture class, and we're meeting after our summer vacation. And you will be very happy to know that we have guest speaker today, uh, Pravrajika Virajaprana Mataji from Vedanta Society of Northern California, San Francisco. And she's going to talk instead of regular scriptures. She's going to speak about Swami Vivekananda in San Francisco. Because Swami Vivekananda went to San Francisco and Bay Area 125 years ago. They just celebrated, and such a rich history, such old center, the center founded by Swami Vivekananda himself, San Francisco Center. Another one is New York Center. Only these two centers Swami Vivekananda founded himself in the United States. So Pravrajika Virajaprana Mataji coming from San Francisco, we got this opportunity. Tomorrow is the seminar where she will be speaking. Day after tomorrow, she's going to give a Sunday service. And now I would request Virajaprana Mataji to talk about the San Francisco Center, and Swami Vivekananda and other monks after him came to that great, old, very honored and very respectable center of the Vedanta Society in the whole of the world, because it was founded by Swami Vivekananda himself. Pravrajika Virajaprana Mataji.
Hi, good evening to you all. Thank you, Swamiji, for this opportunity to visit this beautiful center. It's always nice to be able to go to different centers and meet all our devotees from different parts of the world. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to be with you all. So, Swami has asked me to talk about the history of the Vedanta Society of Northern California. It's quite a history. And it's quite interesting, actually, because it involves so many of our Swamis. I will just start by saying that the three landmark Swamijis that actually promoted Vedanta in San Francisco, Swami Trigunatita was the first, Swami Ashokananda was the second, and Swami Prabhupada was the third. However, after Swami Vivekananda, which I will start with, there were 8 Swamis involved in the Vedanta Society of Northern California. And the interesting thing is, in the early days, say starting in about the 1920s, when the Swamis started coming to this country, and that involved Swami Vivekananda, Swami Saprakashananda, Swami Nikhilananda, who translated the gospel into English, Swami Ashokananda, Swami Prabhavananda, etc. All of these Swamis were quite young, and many of them were disciples either of Swami Brahmananda, some of Holy Mother, of the direct disciples. And one of the Swamis, Swami Prabhavananda, who ultimately went to Southern California, he said to Swami Brahmananda, they weren't used to giving talks or anything in those days at Belur Mutt. And he's like, what am I supposed to do there? What am I supposed to tell people? And Brahmananda said, you just go there, whatever you have heard from us, you tell them. And of course, he became a very great Swami, very widely respected, etc. So all of these Swamis had the courage to come to a different country, a different culture, where there was a lot of prejudice still in that 20th century there. It was quite pronounced. And so they had to face a lot of challenges. And if you see pictures of the early Swamis, they all dressed like priests. like Christian missionaries. So they had regular black shirts and white collars. Swami Ashokananda's famous passport pictures. He looks like a Catholic priest. And when Swami Prabhupada saw a picture of Swami Vivekananda, who was in New York, he said, he looks like a pope. Just the way he was dressed. So they all wore, they wore Western clothes, they wore trousers, they didn't dare wear garawa. They wore robes like Swami Vivekananda, wore when he was in this country with a sash like that. So but with black trousers and so on. This is how they kind of melded into, American society. So to start with Swami Vivekananda, I'll make it brief. But when Swamiji was here in 1893 for the Parliament of Religions, he remained in this country for 3 years, between here and England, traveling back and forth. And it's a long story, and those of you who are familiar with Swamiji's life know a lot of the details of what he went through. Swamiji's health was never good, and after the Parliament, he mistakenly signed up with a lecture bureau that nearly killed him until he got out of that routine of this constant traveling and so many lectures a day and so on. He met a lot of his friends here, lifelong friends and supporters, not only of his work here, but also in India. So after 3 years, at the end of 1896, he went back to India. In 1897, in January, he landed in Colombo, and he was in India for maybe 2.5 years. Again, he traveled all around India. His famous lectures from Colombo to Almore are wonderful, rousing messages to Indians, and also messages, of course, for Westerners too. The summer of 1899, his brother disciples recognized that Swamiji's health was not at all good. And they felt that a long sea voyage might be beneficial for him. Of course, a lot of questions come up. He talked about going to Japan and taking a sea voyage someplace else. So the question has always arisen in my mind, why did Swami decide to come back to the United States? He only had 1 year here. And we can say maybe it's most likely part of Divine Mother's plan. His world mission wasn't quite finished. So at the invitation of Frank Leggett, who Swamiji had known from his first visit, he invited him to Ridgely Manor. And most of you probably are familiar with the name Ridgely Manor, which is in upstate New York, maybe 80 miles north of New York City. I've stayed in Ridgely Manor after Swami Prabhupada passed away for about 4 months. It's a wonderful place. Swamiji's presence is just vivid in living there. He actually lived in the manor house. His bedroom is still, preserved. Fortunately, I was given a room right next to where Swamiji stayed, so I felt like he was my next door neighbor. And in those days, that house is over 100 years old, and so the closets are connected. So when I would open up my closet, it would connect to the closet that was in Swamiji's room, so then I could see right into his room. So it was very nice. Anyhow, Swamiji went to Ridgely Manor, and he spent about 10 weeks there, and it was called the Great Summer. When he sailed from India, he sailed with Sister Nivedita and Swami Turiyananda. He had already asked Swami Turiyananda to come to this country because he wanted him to take over Shanti Ashrama and teach Westerners how to meditate. And how that came to pass was, in their travels in northern India, Swamiji asked him, and Swami Trigunatita was not very positive. And Swamiji started to weep, and he embraced him, and he said, "Brother, I have given my life's blood for this work." And that did it. Swami Turiyananda immediately agreed. So the way Shanti Ashrama came into Swamiji's hands was in New York Center, the one that Swamiji founded that Swami mentioned in 1894. There was a young man living there. He ultimately became Guru Das Maharaj, Swami Ashokananda. He was really interested in becoming a monk. and he had stayed in different Christian monasteries, but it just wasn't quite to his liking. And there was a devotee in New York named Miss Book, or Bach, depending on how you pronounce it. She had a land grant. So the US government in those days, in the late 19th century, they were offering people in the West, anything west of, say, Boston, which was basically cowboys and Indians in those days. They wanted to develop the West. And they said, we will give you 150 acres of land if you develop it for free. So she had inherited a land grant from, her father. She offered it to Swami Vivekananda. And Swami Vivekananda accepted it, but he knew, of course, he could never go there, but he wanted to send Swami Turiyananda there. So he told the devotees, you've heard about Vedanta from me, now I'm going to send you someone who actually lives Vedanta, and he will teach you how to meditate and so on. So that's how that all happened. So Swami Turiyananda came with him. Okay, so then the other kind of interesting intervention of the Divine Mother was, while Swamiji was at Ridgely Manor, he had never mentioned California or going to California ever, that we can ever find in any of his works or any of his letters. And there's probably a number of reasons for that. Mostly because it wasn't developed. There were not many large universities or anything there. And in those days around Boston and Cambridge, these places, there was Harvard and all Yale, all of these established. The intelligentsia were kind of located on the East Coast, let's put it that way. And so those people were educated and they were interested in Oriental thought, etc., and they were receptive. But while he was in Ridgely Manor, Josephine McLeod, one of his devotees, was there. She got a message from a housekeeper in Southern California that her brother was dying, and she had to go and see him. He was outside Los Angeles. So as much as she didn't want to leave Swamiji's company, she said, Swamiji, I have to go. He said, go. And by the way, get up some classes and I'll come. He'd never said that before. He'd never showed any interest in California. And within a few months, Swamiji was on a train, and she met him at the train station in December of 1899. So that's how Swamiji got into Southern California. Once he was in Southern California, of course, he gave lectures there and so on, in Pasadena and other places, mostly around Pasadena, because he had met the Hansborough sisters. Alice Hansborough had two sisters. She had taken a trip to Alaska. She had just read the published version of Swamiji's Raja Yoga. And then she heard there he was in Pasadena, where she lived, giving talks. She said, I never, ever thought I would ever meet him. So anyway, they met him, and they invited him to come and stay after a few lectures, stay in their home, which Swamiji did. He stayed in Pasadena. And Mrs. Hansborough became sort of like Swamiji's press agent. So she would arrange, it was a very charming relationship between Alice Hansborough and Swami Vivekananda. If you haven't read it in Mary Louise books, Sister Garhi's books, you should read the section on California. It's quite charming. She was very naive and very open with Swamiji, loved her a lot. And they had kind of a bantering, relationship. And her sisters didn't think she was very intelligent, or she couldn't do this, or arrange the lectures and everything. And Swamiji taught her to stand on her own feet and ignore everything everybody else said and follow her heart. So he trained her very nicely. So at one point she said, I think you might like me to go to San Francisco. And Swamiji said, yes, I might. And then she followed up on it, and he said, you go there first and arrange something. Why this came up in Swamiji's mind, we don't know. Anyhow, she did that, and Swamiji went. He had gotten an invitation from Reverend Mills and at the Unitarian Church in Oakland, but Swamiji said he wanted to start his work in San Francisco independently. So the first lecture he gave there was in San Francisco. Then he went over to Oakland. So he arrived in the Bay Area in February 1900. And he was only there 3 months. But because it was the end of Swamiji's world mission, his lectures and his talks and everything have an entirely different tone than they had had previously. He seemed to really like San Francisco, and the audiences were very responsive and appreciative. So to cut a long story short, in April of 1900, Swamiji was giving lectures. This is, of course, before the San Francisco earthquake, in downtown San Francisco in Union Square. So in those days, any kind of a big program, lectures or, music halls or something had to be done in these public halls in downtown San Francisco. So there was a place called the Redmonds Building. That was one of the places Swamiji used to give lectures. And Mrs. Hansborough and Mrs. Aspinall found a flat for Swamiji on Turk Street, and it was right on the cable car line. There were cable cars even in those days. And Swamiji could take the cable car downtown and give his lecture, and then they would go for ice cream or dinner or something like that. So after the meeting at the Redmonds Building, April 14th, 1900, this group of Vedanta students said, Swami, we would like to continue studying Vedanta and to support your work in India, and we would like you to found a society here in San Francisco. And Swamiji agreed. And so we actually have the minutes of that meeting in our archives where, Swamiji agreed to do that. So that is how he founded our society. But there was no building, nothing. It was Swami Trigunatita that started everything after that. But Swamiji actually founded the society. In those days, there were no temples. People meet in houses or in public buildings and things like that. Then Swamiji after that, he went and spent 2 weeks in Camp Taylor, which is between San Francisco and our Olima retreat now that we have. And that's another story, which I won't get into. But after that, shortly after that, he spent about another month in San Francisco giving classes on the Gita. And then he sailed for Europe and Egypt, etc., and cut his summertime, trip short and said he wanted to return to India, which he did. He knew he did not have long to live. So he returned to India. So that's, in short, Swami Vivekananda's visit to San Francisco. Now, Swami Turiyananda was in this country at that time, and so in 1900, when Swamiji sailed, back to India, Swami Turiyananda took over as in charge of our society. He wasn't there very long. Again, his health wasn't that great. And so maybe about in that 2-year period, he spent almost 18 months at Shanti Ashrama. And again, Shanti Ashrama has, as Swami knows, he's been there. Maybe some of you here, I don't know. Well, you've been last year, and Buddha Dev has been. It has a very unique atmosphere, spiritual atmosphere, because Swami Turiyananda lived there, and Swami Trigunatita stayed there, and Swami Prakashananda stayed there, etc. It's a very unique place. And then he spent maybe 4 months either in Oakland or Alameda. There was a group in Alameda and San Francisco giving lectures. But giving lectures was not Swami's forte. He was a Vedanta student and a meditator. That was his, his field. So he decided, he was going to go back to India, even though he had heard Mother tell him to forget India. He couldn't forget India. And he wanted to see Swami Vivekananda again. His health wasn't very good. Swamiji knew this, and he had already selected Swami Trigunatita to come and replace him. Now, unfortunately, when Swami Turiyananda was traveling back to India, when he got into India, I think somehow there was some quarantine, something. In the meantime, he got the news that Swami Vivekananda had passed away on July 4th, 1902. It broke his heart. So he never came back to this country, and he ultimately ended up spending a lot of time in Almora and other places and training the junior monks and everything. But that was very hard on him, not to be able to see Swamiji again. So then Swami Trigunatita came in 1903. And he was in San Francisco till 1915, until his death. Swami Trigunatita was I don't know how to describe him. He was a really unique personality in the order. If any of you have read his life, we brought out a book on his life and we published it in 1997, Swami Trigunatita, His Life and Times. He was actually a disciple of the Holy Mother, even though he was initiated by Mother, even though he was Sri Ramakrishna's disciple. And she had to scold him a couple of times for some of his what she called rash actions. You've probably maybe read about it in his life. One time Mother was in like a palanquin and they were going along a village road. You've all heard this. And there were big ruts in the road, probably rainy season. And the Swami saw that and he had kind of a stout body. And he got down, he was going to lie in the rut so the carriage could pass over him so Mother wouldn't be disturbed. But she became aware of this and gave him a good scolding. Of course, he didn't do it, but he was going to do it. This is the kind of man he was. He would do all sorts of very interesting things. And Swamiji also, he said, "You're the crown on my head," because he felt Swami Trigunatita took up his idea of the service and worship of God and man, for one. And two, he started with Bodhin magazine in Bengali, and Swamiji was very pleased with him for that. So whatever Swami Trigunatita took up, he gave his whole heart to it. So when he came to San Francisco, even though he had reservations about would he be able to get any food to eat, would he get any vegetables, he had no idea what was what. But very soon he decided that he had to build a temple. He was living with some devotees on a street not too far away. And so they found property, which is so interesting, in a place called Cow Hollow. And in those days, it was full of cows, literally. And Swami Trigunatita wanted to build a temple that represented all religions, all religious symbols, and all religions were true. So he erected, within 4 months, he conceived of this, and they started in August of 1905, and they dedicated it in January 1906. In 4 months, he built that temple, just 2 floors to begin with. But it was shocking to the people in San Francisco because here it was in Cow Hollow and there were dairies all around and this ornate palace-looking building that no one had a clue even what it was. So during the dedication, most people came just out of curiosity because it just didn't fit into the neighborhood, so to speak. 3 months after that, it was the great earthquake of San Francisco in 1906. And that destroyed most of downtown San Francisco, mostly because of fire. We have pictures in our archives from the Army Corps of Engineers of that time. And of course, the buildings were all brick buildings and those just collapsed. And, there wasn't a fire department, right? There wasn't even a fire brigade. There was a wagon with a horse and like a bucket or something on the back, but all the water mains were broken. So they had no way to fight the fire. So it was really basically the fire that destroyed downtown San Francisco, and it really destroyed it. So any place where Swami Vivekananda had lectured, they were all destroyed. All those buildings, were completely wiped out, which was unfortunate. But Swami Trigunatita, that area in Cow Hollow was not really affected by this disaster. Sometimes you read books and you think all of San Francisco was destroyed. Well, it wasn't the whole of San Francisco. It was basically its downtown area, but it was a large area. And the U.S. Army didn't help because they had this idea if they set dynamite, they could, create fire breaks, and they ended up destroying a lot of buildings by doing that. In any case, Swami Trigunatita, as unique as he was, he ended up becoming really beloved in the city of San Francisco. Everybody loved him. He knew the mayor. He went around in the streets after the earthquake, knocking on people's doors to see if anybody need help, they need food. He was just like that. So everyone, and there was a firehouse right next to the old temple in those days. And he would give prasad from the pujas to the firemen. All of the they didn't know anything about Vedanta. They were Christians, but they all loved him as a person. So even during the earthquake, he went around, he checked on all the devotees that he knew. He could make sure nobody was hurt or needed anything like that. So with the building of the temple, and then 2 years after that, in 1908, he wanted to bring Swami Brahmananda to San Francisco, and he built a third tower, the third floor. But Swami Brahmananda, of course, couldn't come. He was getting older and wasn't well. So that's how our old temple got the third floor. So then other things that Swami Trigunatita did to promote the work of Vedanta in the West is he started the first monastery there. He started a convent there. But the convent wasn't with young women. It was mostly in those days like widows or older women, and it lasted for a few years, and for various reasons. I mean, they followed the exact same kind of routine that he set up for the monastery. There was a house, it's still there, adjacent to the old temple on the opposite corner, and that was the convent. And so he started that idea of having a convent. Monastery, he also had regular retreats at Shanti Ashrama to keep up Swami Turiyananda's pattern. He bought property in Concord in eastern, on the east side there for people to, maybe build little cabins and things for meditation. He started a magazine, The Voice of Freedom, and that went on quite a long time. There was one man living in the old temple that was a printer, and he would set up the printing press downstairs. They would print these things, and they're really quite quaint, these magazines. And usually Swami Trigunatita would write an article, and there would be other, quotes and things there from different religions. It was quite interesting. So he built up the work in that way, and he also trained his students, but he had a completely different method than Swami Turiyananda. His method was quite opposite. In 1906, he got an assistant, and that was Swami Prakashananda. Swami Prakashananda was one of Swami Vivekananda's disciples. And again, his personality was completely different than Swami Trigunatita. He was very sweet, and he was a Sanskrit scholar. He had a very nice chanting and singing voice, etc. But somehow, after some time, we don't know exactly what happened, but there was just something that just didn't melt. He wasn't a cantankerous or any kind of, he didn't interfere with anything. It's just the two Swamis didn't see eye to eye on certain things. So Swami Prakashananda left, and he started another Vedanta center in San Francisco called the Pacific Vedanta. It was just in a different location. And so Swami Trigunatita just soldiered on. He accepted it, and he soldiered on. Now, Swami Trigunatita met with a serious accident in 1914, December. And when I first came to Vedanta, nobody talked about this. But I heard about it. And then when we brought the life out of Swami Trigunatita, we put it in the book. But maybe there were various reasons why it wasn't talked about. But he had a student, a foreign student. He wasn't an initiated student, but he was a student that came regularly to Swami's classes. And he wasn't very mentally balanced, and Swami knew that, and he really tried to help him. That's one side. The second side is, that may not be so well known, but we have learned this through letters and reminiscences and things that he himself wrote that came to us in our archives, that he knew he was destined to die. And he was trying to prepare his students for this. He had Bright's disease, and he used to do all sorts of austere practices, fast for days and days and days, and sleep on the floor, and then sometimes he would eat a large amount. I mean, he was a very unusual yogi. So this student, Swami had tried to, help him, give him suggestions, try to get him to go to the country and rest, etc., etc. Okay, Swami was giving a lecture on Christmas Day, and this student walked into the old temple, and he had something in a bag. And Swami saw him walking towards him. We're sure, I mean, he probably knew something was going to happen. Anyhow, he banged the bag down on the, like the wooden part where Swami was sitting, and it was like a bomb inside that, and it blew Swami out through the door. The person that did this was killed instantly, and other people in the auditorium, there was a student of his named Cara French. She was injured, and I think probably permanently, affected by this. Other people were okay, but the windows were blown out of the temple, and of course it was in the newspaper and all of that. But two things about Swami Trigunatita when this happened. One was he told someone that when he was blown through the door, he fell into Sri Ramakrishna's arms. And we believe that because this is what he said. So Sri Ramakrishna caught him. And the other thing is, the first thing that he said was, "How was that poor fellow?" That's all he said. The poor fellow. He felt so bad for this poor fellow who tried to kill him and ultimately did. Anyhow, so then Swami, the fire department that lived next door immediately came, and they took him to UC, et cetera. Then we saw the hospital reports and all of that. Basically, Swami passed away of gangrene a couple weeks later because there weren't any antibiotics then. But he knew that he was going to pass away. So that's why, it's hard to make a judgment on this student or exactly what happened and so on, because he was an instrument, we can say it like that. Okay, so then Valur Mutt contacted Swami Prakashananda, who was in the city, and asked him to please return to the Vedanta Society and take charge. He agreed, and the Swami passed away, I think, January 1915. It took a little while, but Swami Prakashananda came and took over in 1915, maybe towards the end of the year. Within about a couple years, maybe 5-6 years later, Swami Prabhavananda, who arrived in this country probably in his late 20s, was really young, he served as an assistant to Swami Prakashananda for 2 years, 1923 and 1925. So while Prakashananda was in San Francisco, again, he continued the Shanti Ashrama pilgrimage. He lived there for some time, and all the people there, in the valley, they just loved him. And they would have these like puja picnics type things, and all the ladies, there were Swiss ladies and German ladies, a lot of immigrants, they would cook, and Swami would cook and sing them songs, and we have pictures of him playing a banjo, and I mean, they had a wonderful time. And he would sing with them and play with their children and so on. So he did a lot for Shanti Ashrama. He also gave, of course, talks at the old temple. Swami Prabhavananda moved on in 1925. He went someplace else, and then he ended up in Southern California. It's a little involved, this history, because the Swamis were coming and going to various cities. And some of them didn't even know which cities they were going to go to. Sat Prakashananda, somebody told him, and he was a great scholar, that he should go to St. Louis. This is in the mid-America, and was certainly not something like San Francisco or New York or Boston. Anyway, he ended up going there, and it was quite successful like that. So anyhow, the next Swami that came was Swami Dayananda. Now, Dayananda was the brother of Madhavananda. They were brothers. And actually, the pictures of Dayananda, he looks totally different than Swami Madhavananda. He looks Italian. His hair is part in the middle, and it's kind of curly. He looked very Italian. And he came probably in June 1926, something like that. And then this Swami Prakashananda passed away in February 1927. So Dayananda took charge, but not for very long, because the following June, just 5 or 6 months later, his brother came, Madhavananda came to San Francisco. They were brothers. And so then, of course, Madhavananda was senior, so he took over. And in our, office records, it's not exactly clear. It wasn't like Dayananda then became his assistant. They were like working together. And so Madhavananda was there for 2 years, 1927 to 1929. the Lord Mutt called him back because he was needed for his, not only was he a great scholar, but he had administrative abilities, and he served as general secretary, became the 9th president, but much later, like at 62, something like that. So when he went back, Dayananda again took charge of the society in 1929. In 1931, Swami Vivekananda came. And again, he was extremely young. He ultimately ended up going to Seattle. And so he was serving as his assistant. So after Vivekananda came, then Dayananda, his heart was set on starting a maternity hospital for young mothers and children in India. He had a nurse friend here in San Francisco. And when he saw the medical care that women got in this country and how children were cared for, and there was so much infantile death in India and mothers suffering and so on, he was so large-hearted that he wanted to start a hospital program. And even though Balur Mutt at first pushed back on it because it's Swami being involved in a maternity hospital, it just didn't jive. But ultimately they agreed, and it became a wonderful institution, ultimately becoming the Seva Pratishthan, which is a huge hospital in Kolkata now that serves, not only the Swamis, but others. So Dayananda did a lot for the women. He agreed, with whatever Sister Nivedita was trying to do for education. He wanted to help uplift, the medical situation there, which was a wonderful thing to do. So he went back to India to do that and leaving Vivekananda in charge. So this is 1931. Now, Swami Vivekananda, again, a lot of these Swamis that came, they did not have good health, here for whatever reason. Maybe the climate, the food, whatever. His health was not good. Swami Ashokananda came in July of 1931 as his assistant. And Vivekananda only stayed till 1932, and then I think he went to, at one point he went to Colorado, he went to Providence, but he ended up in Seattle. And that's where, he founded the center there, and, he spent his life there. So Swami Ashokananda took over in 1932. So the second part of our story begins here, because Swami Trigunatita set the work in motion. All of these Swamis were coming and going. They all contributed a lot in terms of maintaining, trying to build up the old temple again after that disaster, and encouraging the devotees and so on. It's all written there in the Swami Trigunatita's life. There's not time to tell all those details. When Swami Ashokananda came, things really started to change. So he was there in 32. And again, the old temple, he was such a dynamic orator that hundreds of people started coming to his lectures. And the old temple, if any of you have seen the old temple, it doesn't accommodate hundreds of people. So people were down on the steps and, practically out in the streets. So he was also giving lectures in downtown San Francisco. Larger halls could accommodate more people. So then he wrote to Swami Shivananda Mahapurush Maharaj, and he asked permission, could he build a new temple? And could the relics that were in the old temple be moved to the new temple? Because of the situation and the devotees and the work and all of that. And Swami Shivananda gave his approval. So Swami Ashokananda started looking for property, to build a new temple. In the meantime, he was kind of like a spiritual entrepreneur, let's put it that way. He had a really broad vision. Kind of like, he envisioned the Olima retreat, having a huge temple and like a university, this kind of thing. He was a very dynamic thinker. And he had been editor at Prabhupada Bharata for many years, and he was quite a dynamic editor. And he got into quite a few rows over Mahatma Gandhi and so on. So he was well known, for his argumentative views on things. A great speaker. anyhow, he was looking for a place for a retreat. And at first, they tried different places up in the Sierras and Huntington Lake and so on. And Sarah Fox, who was a disciple of Swami Sardananda, became a very good friend of his. She convinced him to build a temple in Berkeley, and she paid for it. First, they went to Huntington Lake, but eventually they found this property in Carnelian Bay at Lake Tahoe, and they purchased that property. I think it was, I've got a date written, 1937. They purchased it in 37, and they dedicated it in 38. And Swami Devatmananda, who was in Portland, came, and they had, I think Akhilananda was in Boston, and they had, like, in the living room there, they had a homa and so on. Now, Swami Ashokananda used to spend the entire summer there. He said when he came to this country and he had to lecture, he couldn't write anymore like he used to for Prabhupada Bharata. He said it took an entirely different mindset. His mind was moving in a different direction. Instead of words, written words. The spoken word was different for him. So I think it was a time for him to recoup his health. He used to think a great deal, and he had great plans for the society, for the expansion of the society. And so other cabins were built there, and the devotees would go there, but there were never any big programs or anything there at that time. So then after that, after purchasing Tahoe, Swami was interested in finding a retreat that was closer than Shanti Ashrama. Shanti Ashrama is not a viable option, for a regular retreat because it's located, at a distance from San Francisco. It's quite a drive. There was really no water there, even though Swami Trigunatita, they had wells and windmills, but that was Swami Trigunatita, who had an abundance of energy. But it wasn't easy. And there wasn't any, running water or anything there. So Swami thought, no, we need to have a retreat closer to San Francisco where devotees can come. Again, one of the devotees of the society was a real estate agent, Divine Mother's Hand again. And she found a piece of property, which is now our Olima retreat. And it was a huge piece of property, like 2,200 acres. And Swami wasn't interested in 2,200 acres. He wanted about 100 acres. But this land belonged to a businessman in Los Angeles. And so this businessman had great plans for Olima. I've seen them in the 30s. I mean, he wanted a golf course and, a clubhouse and this and that. And he wanted to expand the whole thing. They had a racetrack and all of this. But he couldn't get buyers and this and that. So he told the Swami, it's all or none. You buy the 2,200 acres or no deal. So then Swami Ashokananda had to go back to the membership. Now you can imagine, in those days what people's salaries might have been in the late 30s and 40s. So somebody could donate $20 or $10, and that was a huge amount in those days. So they were trying to raise money to build a new temple. Now Swami's asking, should we buy this property for our retreat? I mean, he didn't make any decision without discussing it with everyone. He didn't just make a, authoritative statement, no, we're going to do this or that. And everybody said, no, Swami, we should get this property. It's a great sacrifice. The society bought the property. And so I have heard that Mrs. Soule, who was the secretary for many years, I met her when I first came, she would drive the Swami around, and apparently when she was driving down our long avenue with the big eucalyptus tree, Swami Ashokananda had pictures of Thakur Ma, and he was showing them, and he said to her that he felt that Ramakrishna was hovering over the property like a mother bird with its wings outraised to protect everyone who would come there, which is a beautiful idea. And it certainly seems to have been true because we've never had any, real problems at Olima. I mean, that's another story. We've had to, struggle with our land rights and all, but everything's always, turned out well. In the 70s, early 70s, when I was there, we were going door to door, trying to get, people to sign because on the south side of us, there was a riding academy. And on the north side of us, there's the national park. And so people didn't want to have to go out on the highway. They wanted to cut through our property to get to the thing. So there was this huge thing going on. So we made a compromise and created what we call the Rift Zone Trail, because the San Andreas Fault runs right through our property. And we allowed people to come through part of the property to connect so they didn't have to go out on. It was a huge success. And Swami Ashokanandaji, mother's disciple, came from Portland, and he sat in the new temple and he read the Chandi for several days. I'm sure all of this had some effect. And he went into the women's retreat house and he did some puja there. Has anybody here met Swami Ashokananda? No one has met him. Oh, he was wonderful. Anyhow, our brahmachari and sannyas guru. Anyhow, he came out of the women's retreat house and he said, Mother told him, they too are my children, the people that were making all the noise about wanting a trail. That's what he said. And so we thought, now what's going to happen? Nothing happened. The trail went through. We've never had any problems. No one's ever camped. No one's ever drank there or littered the place. Nothing. We've never, and that was in the 70s. This is 2025. It's pretty amazing. I think it's all through Mother's grace and through the Swami's reading of the Chandi at the new temple, et cetera, et cetera. That was a little extra help we had for that. Anyway, Swami bought this property, and that was in 1946, and he dedicated it. Okay, so they purchased the property for Olima in 41. In the meantime, nothing could happen there because the Second World War broke out, and all building materials had to go to the war effort. But the property was purchased on the corner of Vallejo and Fillmore. In the meantime, of course, Berkeley was underway. And as I said, Sarah Fox, a disciple of Swami Sarananda, and her sister too, Rebecca, she was quite an amazing person, and Swami Ashokananda felt she was the most spiritual person he'd met in the West. He actually said that. She was something. And she was funny, she's 5'2", little dumpy little school teacher type, but I mean, she was a Brahmajnani. This woman was really something. But when you saw her or you see pictures of her, there's a book recently, Amrita Sam's written her life, and it's quite interesting. Anyway, she was really something. So Mrs. Soule, her husband was a professor, out at San Francisco State. So some of these people that were well placed in society were helping Swami Ashokananda. He was a little dark. He was a Bengali, but he could not go over to Berkeley and try to, purchase property in the 1930s. That didn't fly. So Mrs. Soule went from house to house to house to house, and they had a wonderful architect, this Mr. Gutterson, and she got the approval of everybody who lived in that neighborhood. All of the, these different people in the Vedanta Society helped Swami in this effort. And the Berkeley Temple is a beautiful temple. Mr. Gutterson was the architect there, and it's of course right in the middle of the UC campus now. But anyway, that was dedicated in 1939. Prabhavananda came, Devatmananda came from Portland, and during the Durga Puja days that was dedicated. So Berkeley was settled in 39. 41, the new temple property was purchased, but it sat there until after the war. In the meantime, there were devotees in Sacramento, and Swami Ashokananda started traveling to Sacramento to give classes there, and they wanted a center. So now we have Lake Tahoe, we have Olima, we have the new temple that's trying to be built. We have Berkeley. This is all under Swami Ashokananda and the Vedanta Society in San Francisco. Now Sacramento wants a center. So Swami Ashokananda traveled there. His health wasn't good, but they purchased some property in 1953. But it took 11 years to build the temple because the work was done entirely by our monks, our nuns, and the devotees. 11 years, and it was just a dirt lot, and they built the entire thing. The gardens, the temple, and so on. It's beautiful. And one of the monks there, I think he did these like adobe bricks and so on. So it was quite a labor of love, let's put it that way. And it was dedicated in 64 during Jagadatri Puja. So anyway, the new temple finally, after the war was over, the temple was completed with great expertise. And Swami Trigunatita, our American Swami, oversaw that. And it was dedicated in 1959 during Durga Puja again. Swami Ashokananda, Swami Vivekananda, they did a special worship to Divine Mother. And Swami Saprakashananda was chanting the Chandi. All the different Swamis in this country, came at that time. It was quite something. And they had these big screens that they put across when they were invoking the prana and the deities. I mean, the devotees were all in the auditorium, but they couldn't see what the Swamis were doing at that time. And one of our nuns, I've heard this from her and someone else, that Swami Saprakashananda, who was on this side, on Christ's side, and on those who've seen our altar on Buddha's side, on this side were the Swamis that were doing puja to Mother. Swami Saprakashananda was chanting, and he suddenly stopped chanting. And he was completely motionless and silent. And Swami Ashokananda got up, and he went over. He didn't touch him, but he got close to him, and he didn't say anything. And he went back, and he sat down. And after some time, I guess the Swami, anyway, apparently I have heard that the Swami went into a very high state, and Swami Ashokananda recognized that, and he never said anything. He didn't touch him or anything like that. This was the kind of atmosphere that was created during the dedication of the new temple. It was extremely vibrant, and apparently everyone in the auditorium felt it. So everyone felt uplifted by this. And I've heard other stories about Saprakashananda from his own students in St. Louis, similar things that had happened. So he was really something, a very dignified, I never met him, he was alive, but he wasn't traveling when I joined the convent, but he was still there, but very silent, scholarly, but a very spiritual person. So the temple was dedicated. Am I running out of time? Just tell me, Swami, how much time?
8.
Is it okay?
Yeah, 7 minutes.
Okay, 10 more minutes? Okay. Anyway, so basically that was, Swami Ashokananda's contribution, which were huge. Then Swami Prabhutananda, Swami Ashokananda passed away in 1969, and I can just add that his assistants, he had 3 assistants. Swami Shantarupananda came from India in 1948, and Swami sent him over to Berkeley to be the resident minister in Berkeley, because now the society was huge with all these buildings and things. Swami Shraddhananda came in 1957 as his second assistant. Swami Swahananda came in 1968. Swami Ashokananda passed away in December of 1969. At that time, the Lord Mutt decided that it should be 3 separate centers because it was huge. One Swami, trying, or 2 Swamis trying to run this was too much. So then Swami Shraddhananda was assigned Sacramento, and Swami Swahananda was sent to Berkeley, and Swami Prabhutananda came to this country 6 months after Swami Ashokananda passed away in June of 1970. So when Ashokananda passed away for that maybe a year, Shantarupananda was in charge of the Vedanta Society in San Francisco. But he had a bad back and he wanted to return to Lucknow. So Swami Prabhutananda was assistant maybe 6 months. And then in December of 1970, Swami Shantarupananda went back to India for good, and Swami Prabhutananda took over right in like January or so. In Swami's time, in brief, again, the society expanded. We built the women's retreat house, which was in the minds of people, but it never happened. So the women's retreat house was built again. It was The architect was this Mr. Gutterson, who did a fantastically beautiful job on the women's retreat house. It's just a marvelous place. And the meditation room is the quietest place in our whole society. It's really a wonderful place. So that was dedicated on Buddha's birthday in 72. And in 75, the old Shafter Manor, which was 100 years old, we purchased that. And that was turned into the men's retreat house and dedicated in 75. Then Swami, he started all kinds of programs. We started Sanskrit chanting, and he gave us, the nuns, a Sanskrit chanting class. He was very particular. He was a South Indian, so he was very particular about the pronunciation. He said, "You all do very well, but you have the San Francisco touch." Because we couldn't roll the R's like South Indians. That was pretty funny. And he started having 3 annual retreats at Olima for the devotees. The devotees loved it, just, close, Labor Day, winter retreat, like that. He also used Lake Tahoe, and we started an annual pilgrimage to Shanti Ashrama every year from 1980 on and so on. So Swami expanded. He was from Bangalore. And when I finally visited Bangalore, I could understand Swami's interest in music, etc., because in the Bangalore temple, there'd be 500 people in the temple, and they'd all be singing, not looking at the book, every single song, and Swami Kripamayananda was the leader. Oh my God, the whole temple rocked. It was just amazing. So Swami introduced, for us, he said, every puja now you have to learn a new Sanskrit song. So our choir director, she was amazing. She would listen to these tapes and she would transcribe it into Western notation for us to learn. And then we'd listen to the Swamis and try to imitate the curly cues and all of these. We tried. Anyhow, so he introduced Sanskrit. He introduced classes practically every day and so on. So he said a temple should be alive. Something should always be going on there. So he was very interested in, helping individuals try to become spiritual. He had interviews, he would see people, took great interest in guests, et cetera, et cetera. Swami always extended himself to whoever came. Even when he was practically at the end of his life, he met Kripamayananda at the airport. And he was quite sick then. Anyway, so then in 95, 96, the new addition to the temple was added because we needed more space. Activities grow and more people come. So that was a 3-day dedication, 95, 96. It's called the Swami Vivekananda Centenary Hall. Then the old temple needed to be renovated. In Swami Trigunatita's time, he didn't have a foundation to the building. It was raised in 4 months. And of course, now in San Francisco, everything has to be retrofitted. It has to be earthquake proof, et cetera, et cetera. So the building restrictions and requirements are very, particular and intense. So they had to do quite a lot of work there to retrofit, the old temple. So the old temple was renovated and then rededicated in 2016. So that Swami initiated that. And we also developed the Vivekananda Grove at Olima, which was a memorial to Swamiji. Swami Ashokananda wanted it. In 63, they planted a few trees. And then later, one of our nuns, they made a concrete plaque, but it wasn't really a memorial. Now we have a real memorial there. And of course, Swami, I would take him pictures of the development of it in his room and show him Swamiji's statue. He would salute. But he passed away before we actually dedicated it. So that's, in capsule summary, the history of the Vedanta Society. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. It's kind of an interesting story, I think, because it involves so many Swamis. And, the old temple, when you think of how many Swamis stayed at the old temple, and all that meditation and tapas and prayer, it's really something. So I think we're quite lucky, that we had that opportunity. because most of the Swamis, when they came here from India, you know, they either went to Boston, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. I mean, California, this is where they came. And then slowly, Portland or Seattle or St. Louis, it kind of, you know, just by the way, it rose up. And now there's so many sub-centers, you know, all throughout the country, thanks to Swami Swahananda to a great extent. He was quite an expansionist. Swami Pravrajika and Swami Swahananda were very good friends, and it was the funniest thing you could ever believe, because Swami Swahananda was tall, and he was, you know, like this when he spoke, and he was quite active, and Swami Pravrajika was very restrained and very quiet, but they were really good friends, and so Swami Swahananda would always try to provoke Swami Pravrajika, and he would say, why do you have 4 worships? You know, 2 worships in the convent and 2 worship at the old temple and the new temple. Why don't you just have 1 worship? You know, like he would. And Swami would go, mm-hmm. That was his response. And I would hear them. They would walk in Olema together, and you could hear Swami Swahananda from the buildings, and they'd be around the corner. You'd never hear Swami Pravrajika's voice. You knew he was talking, but you wouldn't hear his voice. But they were such good friends. It was really fun to see that. And I remember once when Swami was ill, and he would come to the Vivekananda Hall, like the last years of his life. And he had to use a walker, which he resisted at first, but he finally, you know, gave into it. And he said that this is my friend, and he would hold on to it. And one of our devotees asked him something about, you know, the presence of God or something. She was a close devotee, and Swami was holding on to his walker, and he said, just like you feel the support, that's how you feel the presence of God. He's always there for you, and he's grasping his. It was really powerful, and she got the message. But anyway, one day he was walking around in Mataji Pravrajika, who's going to be 98 in October. She used to talk to Swami Bhaskarananda on the phone. She's a little older than Bhaskarananda. Now he's maybe 95 or something. He called her up to ask her advice about something, some pain he was having or something. And Swami had a very dry sense of humor. And so Mataji Pravrajika is waxing eloquent. You know, the Swami called her and asking, you know, her advice, some medical advice. And Swami stopped his walker and he looked at her and he said, well, when you're desperate, you'll take the help of anyone. And of course, she laughed. And one devotee was visiting from India, Dr. Sudarshan, and he got a big kick out of that comment. And then once Priti Prana showed him some picture of Swami Bhaskarananda, and Swami looked at it with a smile, and he said, if Balur Mutt sees this, they'll never believe he's not well. So these are just a few stories. Thank you.
That's so wonderful. So we didn't have questions, but we must have all have wishes. And we remember so much from Bhutananji, his love for Vedanta Society of Toronto was very much. So he often used to come every year almost and give the retreat. And he was a very good friend of Swami Kripamayananda. And after Prabhupadaji's passed away, then also he came for his memorial, and also he came to give a retreat here. And he fell sick here. And when Swami Prabhupada fell sick, I don't know how Dr. Sheskiri and Buddhadev, all they served him. They took him to hospital at night and served him. And then I had the opportunity to go with him to San Francisco. First time I visit to San Francisco was with Swami Prabhupada, a great lover of the devotees of Vedanta Society, Guru of our Leena Chakravarti. So that is a wonderful story, and we were told so beautifully about you. With you were a student of history, or I don't know what, you will remember every year, every month as it were, and every Swami's name so wonderfully. Everything was so clearly coming to us. The flow of Ganga River is coming to us. The only wish we have now, we can't meet the Swamis that have already passed away, but we can still go to San Francisco and Berkeley and Sacramento, Colima, Lake Tahoe, all those places, and see the places where Swami Vivekananda went, Swami Trigunatita went, and all these great monks after him, Ashokananda. So many monks, all this came and served the Vedanta here among the people and inspired them. So if we could go all, it would be very nice to see the holy places associated with the great monks. That Mataji wrote that list in us.
Okay, Swamiji, I just want to add that, Swami was actually instrumental in forming the society. Before Pramatananda ever came here, way back in the early 70s, the devotees would, Swami would come to Toronto and encourage people. And he would give retreats here. I mean, the Sept and some of these old devotees. And, I think he also encouraged, through the Lord Mutt, that some Swamis should be sent. And eventually, of course, it happened. It also happened some other center that they wanted a Swami, and Swami wrote to the Lord Mutt, recommending. So all quietly, behind the scenes, he would do these things. It's wonderful.
He was very much respected in the remote. Also, his words, his suggestion, his advice was they all heard. And Swami came here after so many years. It was founded in 1968. Swami came here in 1989. So after so many years of foundation of Vedanta Society of Toronto, Swami Kripamayananda came, and so wonderful now by his hard work, prayer, tapasya, and blessing. The Vedanta Society of Toronto is doing so well. So Mataji, we are very grateful to you for coming on a this long flight for time change. You gave such wonderful talk to us. So fresh you are. You are like Prabhupada.
Not quite, but
Prabhupada is
ever striving.
11 o'clock at night, because flights are, because we requested her to give a talk. That's why she has a very early flight. 5 hours of flying and 3 hours of time to fly. It takes 8 hours to come here. So Prabhupada used to come like an afternoon flight, and he used to come around 11 o'clock. So he used to say, what should we serve more for your food? Nothing is required. Just if you can give one rasam. There is one lady used to make rasam. Oh, rasam, I will say no. I will not say no for rasam. So we used to love rasam. So we are so grateful, Mataji, for this. And we're looking forward for the retreat, for the seminar tomorrow. And long day again for you. And from 8:30 we'll have breakfast, and after that we'll all meet the class at 9:15. We'll start breakfast. At whole day, group discussion, panel discussion, all that. Tomorrow afternoon they're taking you somewhere in Niagara Falls, I think. After the day after tomorrow, in Sunday service from 11 to 12, and after having a quick lunch, I'm going to Ottawa for our tribe with the day. I hope you're coming to the east coast of Canada. It will be very joyful to you. To Ottawa and Montreal and
Niagara Falls.
Niagara Falls, of course.
I've never seen Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
I'm
Niagara
looking forward to
Falls
that.
from Canadian side, it's
Yes.
something worth seeing. And also, Gurudev has planned you to take you to Thousand Island Park to see the
Yes.
cottage. We
That's
the
a
cottage
cool
from
tree.
outside. It's closed. They bolted it, but we can see from outside. The rock very meditated, and the landing very gone. So all that's going to be very, very inspiring.
Thank you, Swami, for arranging all this. It's
Good
wonderful.
pilgrimage for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Now we
Thank
have
you.
supper. Please don't go away without eating that. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu Janani Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagat Guru Padme Gayo Shridva Pranamami Guru.
Thank you.
So online people cannot have supper, so we'll have still holy company of Virajaprana Mataji. So now we'll say bye to you. Good night.